Hello and welcome to TiVo, where we talk about tactics and their evolution. Today we're going to be focusing on a recent match between Wolves and Manchester United, which finished with a 1-0 victory to Wolves. And what we're going to focus on, because it has a lot of attention in the media, is the disastrous performance of Manchester United. Before that, we're going to look at some pre-match context. One of the things that has been argued recently is that Manchester United, from an attacking point of view, have become very boring. One of the ways we can test that hypothesis of Man United boringness is by looking at expected goals per match. So this is a measure of the number and the quality of chances that Manchester United are creating in recent times, and on this graph, since the beginning of the season. They created 0.8 versus Wolves, 2 versus Burnley, 1.2 versus Newcastle, and so on and so forth. So zooming in on the most recent matches, looking at the Rangnick effect, I think the concern is that against the relatively weaker sides that we have on here, Crystal Palace, of course, maybe moving in a positive direction, but not a world-class side. Newcastle, of course, not. Wolves, a good side, but still a side you'd expect Man United at home to be creating many more chances. You can say that they have become boring in the sense that they are not creating very much. And this video is going to explore why. Before we go into the reasons, we're just going to look at some more data from the game itself, starting with expected goals from the match. And this was relatively even, as you can see, 0.8 as we saw earlier, and 0.7 for Wolves. Again, the context for Wolves is that, okay, change of manager and so on, slightly more progressive football, but still not a side that you'd expect to dominate nor create very many chances. Manchester United at home, you'd expect to be creating more than that. And we can dig in now to that match data a little bit deeper and see the extent to which United and Wolves had touches of the ball in the attacking third. So Wolves had 30% of their touches in Manchester United's defensive third, which of course is a measure of not only how dominant they were in the match, but whether they progressed the ball towards the opposition's goal, which they want to do for very, very obvious reasons. United had only 24% of their touches, almost half of the time that they had the ball were in the middle third. This points to a recurring problem for Manchester United throughout this season, and arguably throughout last season, at least at times, even though they finished second, is the inability of their players to effectively and efficiently progress the ball into the final third. And what that resulted in is that Wolves had many more shots on goal, 19 in fact, six of them being on target. United had only 9 shots overall and only 2 shots on target, which is a miserable return from a home fixture. Again, the context being against a mid-table side. One of the really curious things about Rangnick's tenure so far is that there's still not, at least in a few of the matches, they're still not putting the opposition under a huge amount of pressure, which of course is what Rangnick is famous for, and is something that he adopted since the 1970s, I believe, having observed a friendly where Lobanovsky, the famous Ukrainian manager, was in charge of Dynamo Kiev, or something like that, inspired him to take this approach to his football. But Manchester United here, as measured by passes per defensive action, so this is the average number of passes that a team allows the opposition to make before they try to prevent that progress by putting in a tackle or whatever. You can see that those numbers are almost exactly the same, and they are high in that a lower number indicates a higher amount of pressure on the opposition. One of the reasons I think United struggled in this match was that they were trying to create through their wide players. So these would be Sancho and Greenwood. Sancho in particular played to some extent like an orthodox winger. playing out towards the left-hand side. And you can see that reflected in the average positions from the website whoscored.com. Greenwood sat slightly narrower, as you'd expect him to do, with Wan-Bissaka overlapping. We're not going to talk about how ineffective Wan-Bissaka is at overlapping and going forward in general, because that topic has been covered by myself and many others to the point of exhaustion. So we can assume that Wan-Bissaka wasn't effective from an attacking point of view. The United and the Wolves approach was similar in that through Trincao and Podence, Wolves were also looking to create through their wider players. And in reference to some of the pictures of the match that we're going to go through in a second, we can talk about how Wolves were so much more effective in utilising their wide players versus United. Having covered some of the context, we're now going to look at how Wolves use their wide players to good effect in this match. This is very early on in the match. It's a ball played by Neves out to the wide area, nothing extraordinary in that. But what we're going to look at is how Wolves push up and build the play around their wide right player, in this case Trincao. Trincao gets the ball under control, moving out towards the right-hand side. Shaw comes across, which is creating a space in the channel. The central midfielder comes out to support him. And in supporting Trincao, that gives the player on the ball another option. It gives Manchester United defender something else to consider. What Trincao then does is he moves infield with the ball and plays the ball to another central midfielder who is able to get a shot on goal, which he does, and Shaw ends up blocking that particular attempt. The point here, though, is that the players are working in support of each other to move the Manchester United defence around in order to work the space. And just seconds later, we have a very similar scenario, this time with Podence out on the left-hand side. He has two players in support of him. He's able to go back in field or go down the line. He ends up playing ball down the line, and left wing-back is able to cross. And just see the amount of space that is created in the centre of Manchester United's defence by being in support of each other and shifting the back line of Manchester United from right and then to the left. There's nothing especially innovative about this, but Wolves work the ball in these wide areas and then into the central areas particularly effectively. And what we'll go on to see is how Manchester United have the same basic structure and intent, but they don't play in support of each. Here we can see Greenwood, for example, running down the right-hand side. He had a pretty effective game, was bafflingly substituted, whereas probably Ronaldo should have been the one to for the manager to take off, but that's a whole other story. So Greenwood running down the right here. But there is absolutely no one around him, so he has to cut back towards his own goal and play the ball backwards. He plays the ball backwards to McTominay, who plays the ball backwards to Wan-Bissaka, who plays the ball backwards again. There's nothing particularly wrong with recycling possession if the intention is to switch to the left-hand side, but I'm not really clear that that was the intention. I just think Greenwood was left isolated with no. Similar example here with Sancho running down the left, was accused of having a bad game, but was just left very isolated. Here on the right-hand side, Wan-Bissaka is playing the ball into Greenwood, but what we'll see is that Greenwood immediately plays the ball backwards. He's probably not so confident that Wan-Bissaka will be able to do anything on the ball from an attacking point of view, but more importantly, this isn't enough support around these two players, or any support around these two players. If you see Ronaldo and Cavani at the top of the screen there, they're entirely static, which I don't think is particularly an issue, but one of them needs to be coming across. And here we have Sancho playing on the left-hand side here. Cavani is potentially making a run into the space on the left. But someone, for example, McTominay, but perhaps he's staying in his position in order to prevent counter-attacks, I don't know. But it just isn't sufficient for Sancho to be on the ball, surrounded by three Wolves players, or two Wolves players and then one to cover. Cavani is not in the right position to receive the ball. And it does feel like United's approach is very much reliant on a couple of talented attacking players, for example Greenwood and Sancho, being able to do something on their own, beat a man or beat two or even three men, and then cross the ball in for Ronaldo or Cavani. Here we have Greenwood playing the ball from the centre of the field out to Sancho. There's a huge amount of space with the right back Semedo being drawn out of position onto Sancho, but no one making a run in behind. So again, there's just a complete lack of cohesiveness, and I think a naivety about the extent to which Sancho and Greenwood can make something out of nothing all on their own. Now, when Fernandes came on, again, somewhat confusingly for Greenwood, but nevertheless, the positions that he took up and his ability on the ball, but I think more so the positions that he took up, allowed Manchester United a better platform to construct attacking plays effectively. So you could see from the previous image that Fernandes had plenty of options around him. He doesn't actually choose any of those options. Wolves, in this case, are obviously drawn towards the right-hand side, so there's space there on the left-hand side. And here Sancho is in let's say a realistic attacking position. So he has Semedo coming out to cover, which is creating space in the channel. Sancho can pick out perhaps Cavani, who's going to come towards the ball, or he can drive down the left-hand side in order to cross the ball into the Wolves penalty box. So it was a really baffling approach from an attacking point of view by Manchester United, and we'll hope to see that, or it'll be interesting to see whether they can improve that in the matches to come. As said, I think they were over-reliant on individuals and not really thinking about the system. It may have worked in the past, 10, 20 years ago in the Premier League, but teams like Wolves are much more sophisticated in how they defend those spaces and leave those attacking players isolated. If you like this video, please express that by leaving a like. While you're there, you may as well subscribe to the channel, and why not drop me a comment and I'll get back to you.